Hello, everybody. I'd like to welcome you all on behalf of the Graduate Student Division Education Committee. Today we are going to have a presentation by Dr. Beth Briczinski on the topic of misbranded imitation dairy products. In 2010, Beth joined the National Milk Producers Federation as Vice President of Dairy Foods and Nutrition, where her responsibilities include food processing, food safety and public health, human nutrition, labeling, and domestic standards of identity. You can take it away, Beth.
Sure. Thank you, Eric. Well, good morning to those of you who are not on the East Coast. Good afternoon to those of you who are. I wanted to start by thanking the Graduate Student Committee for asking me to talk today on a subject that is near and dear to my heart. So I'm hoping to sort of share some of my thoughts, some National Milk thoughts with you on this topic, and hopefully get you thinking about some things. So for those of you who aren't aware, I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on who the National Milk Producers Federation is. So NMPF is a trade association. We're actually the oldest commodity trade association in the United States. We were established in 1916, so coming up on our 100-year anniversary here pretty soon. We represent the dairy co-ops. Okay, so this is how milk is marketed in the United States. Basically how milk moves from farms to processing facilities is primarily done through cooperatives. National Milk members market the majority of the milk that is actually produced in the United States. And our goal, National Milk's goal, is to assure that American consumers have an adequate supply of safe and wholesome milk and dairy products. So to do that, we provide a forum through which cooperatives, as well as their dairy farmer members, are able to engage and participate in the development of policy on a variety of issues that affect our industry. So this includes things like milk pricing. It also includes things like farm labor, on-farm environmental issues. We also get engaged on things like animal care as well as animal health. We have folks who work on trade policy. We have lobbyists who work up on the Hill, so folks who are involved in farm bill negotiations. And then there are folks like me. So I am a food scientist working at National Milk. My primary areas of responsibility, as Eric mentioned, are food safety, nutrition, standards, and labeling. And I primarily interact with the regulatory agencies. So specifically, I'm involved with FDA and USDA. And as we're going to talk about today, when we talk about issues of standards and labeling, primarily this is a regulatory type activity. So to jump right in, I want to give you a little bit of background about standards of identity. And for those of you who don't know, I'm not sure how familiar you are, standards of identity are federally established requirements that basically govern the use of specific names of foods. Okay, so when we talk about standards of identity, it could be a set of processing requirements. So under what manufacturing conditions do I have to use in order to be able to name a food with a specific name? Okay, it could be composition requirements for a food. So it could be, whether it's component-based, so fat, solids, protein, things like that, or it could be ingredients, whether it's ingredients that have to be used in making that food, whether it's optional ingredients to make that food, or whether it's ingredients that I'm not allowed to use in order for me to make that food, to be able to use that term, that standardized name. It also has to do with labeling requirements. Okay, so all of these things encompass a standard. If you look in the Code of Federal Regulations, Title 21 has a lot of standards for foods. Okay, so that's where you're going to find the standards of identity. Many of those standards are for dairy foods. Okay, so specifically, if you're in the CFR and you look at parts 131 and 135, that's where you're going to find dairy standards for things like milk and yogurt and sour cream and ice cream. A lot of cheeses also have standards of identity. So that's really when we talk about the name of a food, and you know, a lot of our dairy products do have standardized names. Here I've thrown up the example of the standard of identity for milk. So milk is the lacteal secretion, practically free from colostrum, obtained by the complete milking of one or more healthy cows. Okay, and then it goes on to say that it has to be pasteurized, and it has some limits in terms of minimum milk solids, non-fat content, and a minimum fat content. So basically what that's saying is if I want to call something milk, I have to meet the criteria that are established in this standard. So this is just one example. Like I said, you know, a lot of our dairy foods do have standards of identity that have been established. And this is, I'm going to focus a lot of my discussion this morning on milk. So I wanted to put this one up here just so we had a basic understanding. And I think this is pretty straightforward, okay? So milk comes from cows. Now, despite the fact that we have a standard of identity for milk, if you go to the grocery store, you're going to see a lot of other things that don't come from cows, however, that do use the term milk on them. So I don't know how often you do this, but I have to admit, so this, you know, I'm a dairy person, so I will go to the grocery store, and I'm always really curious to see what I can find in the dairy aisle, okay? So I'd encourage you, go to your grocery store the next time and, you know, just look down the aisle and see what you can find. Really, there's a lot of interesting products in the marketplace right now. Now, I do talk about imitation dairy products and misbranded dairy products quite a bit. So I always like to say, you know, if I was talking to you guys and we were looking at the current marketplace, say 15 or even 20 years ago, what you might find in the grocery store, in addition to your typical milk, is you might find some containers of soy milk. Okay, and I admit that's not my term, but I'm putting it in quotes. You'll see soy milk on packages. Now, if this was 20 years ago, I might only see this in niche markets. Okay, so health food stores, really not sort of mainstream grocery stores. But definitely, if I go to, you know, my local grocery store, my chain store, I'm talking a typical grocery store, you can easily find this in the dairy case now. Okay, so your typical grocery stores, your warehouse clubs, all those sorts of things, you can find products labeled soy milk. And I would encourage you, really, go and look at the aisle. I think you'd be amazed at what else you can find there. I know if I go to my grocery store, I can find a variety of milks. Things like I can find rice milk, I can find barley milk, oat milk, wheat milk, okay, so, you know, milks, okay, so fluid beverages that are made from a variety of grains, okay, so basically taking these grains, grinding them up and filtering them and slapping the name milk on the front of the container. I can also find, as I go in this aisle, I can find almond milk, and I can find peanut milk, I can find hazelnut milk, cashew, and even walnut milk. Okay, and again, just to be clear, in case you're a little confused here, this isn't milk that is flavored with almonds. This is ground up almonds that have been run through a filter. Okay, and that's what we're seeing in the grocery store as being called almond milk. But there's still more out there. So, you know, I can go to my grocery store and I can find things from seeds. So I can find milk from hemp seeds and from sesame seeds and from sunflower seeds. Gosh, my slide is getting awfully crowded here. I'm amazed because every time I think I'm done with finding different types of milks in the grocery store, someone surprises me. So I've also been able to find things like potato milk. Recently, I've also come across green pea milk. So both of these, so we have two vegetables here that are showing up in the milk category. I mentioned I was a food scientist, so I'm a little confused. I don't really know what potato milk is. To me, that sounds like can't be much more than a little starch and water. Just because it's white, it doesn't mean that it's milk, okay? Likewise, green pea milk. So, you know, someone's taken green peas and ground them up and filtered it and you're calling it green pea milk. I thought when you take a vegetable and crush it and take the liquid, I thought you had juice, but you can find green pea milk. And, you know, like I said, I mentioned that this is an area I pay attention to, so it's amazing. Every time I think that I'm done, and I'm almost running out of room on my slide here, every time I think I'm done with finding an alternate beverage that is labeled as milk, someone turns around and surprises me. So the latest that I've seen, and this was just a couple of weeks ago, algae milk. Okay, so this is, to be honest, it looks green and slimy. I'm not sure how appealing it is, but you know, this is quite a cluttered marketplace that we have right now, and all of these products have the name milk right on the front of the container. Okay, and clearly none of this has come from a cow. Okay, it's never seen the inside of a dairy barn at all whatsoever. Now, let's continue talking about the marketplace. So I mentioned if this was, you know, 15, 20 years ago, we really would have ended our discussion with soy milk and been done there. But the marketplace has expanded. So beyond these various plants that are being ground up and called milk, we're also seeing this extend into the names of other standardized dairy foods, so foods that have a standard of identity. Those terms are being corrupted, so things like yogurt. Okay, so again, I can guarantee you're going to find this in your typical grocery store in your neighborhood. You can find soy yogurt. You can find rice yogurt. Okay, yogurt is a standardized dairy term, so there's a standard of identity for yogurt. You can find different types of ice creams, so you can find hemp ice cream. Okay, you can find soy ice cream. You can find rice ice cream. You can find various types of cheeses, whether it's soy or rice. You know, all sorts of non-dairy cheeses. But the point is they're not calling it something else. They're calling it cheese. Okay. You can find, one I found recently was cashew cream cheese. Right. I can also find combination foods that are made with these analogs. So a great example is, you know, if you go to the frozen section, you can find frozen pizzas that are made with soy cheese. So really, this proliferation of imitation dairy products, it's now beyond just the beverage category, and I think that's really important for us to keep in mind. Now, I'm going to go through and talk a little bit more about imitation dairy products and some of the things that National Milk specifically has done in terms of trying to engage in this area. But before I do that, I think it's important for you to understand where I'm coming from, where National Milk is coming from. So to give you a little bit of background, I want to share with you National Milk's policy statements related to the issues of labeling and misbranding. Okay, so two policy statements. The first is National Milk supports protecting the integrity of dairy products through federal standards of identity. So we talked about what standards of identity were. I mentioned that a number of dairy products do have federal standards of identity established for them. National Milk believes that it's important that we protect standards of identity. It's a way of promoting fair competition in the marketplace. Okay, so if I want to make, let's take yogurt. Yogurt is an example. If I want to make yogurt, I need to adhere to the standard of identity for yogurt in order for me to be able to call my product yogurt. If I don't want to adhere to the standard, that's fine. I can still make that product. I just can't call it yogurt. I have to call it something else. Okay. The other reason we think it's important to protect standards of identity is it does eliminate consumer confusion. Okay. And if you're trying to figure out what I mean by consumer confusion, we're going to come back to this concept a couple of times throughout my presentation. But really, the basic idea is that consumers know what they're getting when they go to the store and they buy yogurt. They know what they're getting when they go to the store and they buy milk. Okay. If we get rid of those standards, then there's going to be confusion. Consumers aren't going to know what's inside that package. Okay. So the second policy statement, that's the basis for some of the things National Milk has done. We oppose allowing imitation dairy products, and I just gave you a whole big long laundry list, to use the names of standardized dairy foods. So basically, if a standard exists, we don't think that it's appropriate for an imitation dairy product to use that term. Okay, if they do, we think that that is a false and misleading label. It's clearly an imitation of a standardized dairy product. And when you're representing yourself as a food for which a standard does exist, that's what we call misbranding. So I want to go through a quick timeline when we talk about misbranding to sort of put in perspective some of the things that have been done in the policy area related to misbranding. So this goes back to 1997. All right, in 1997, the Soy Foods Association sent a petition to FDA. And the gist of their petition was they felt that soy milk, so one word, soy milk, should be recognized by FDA as a common name. So they wanted sort of FDA protection, FDA recognition that this was a common term, and they set up some standards that they felt should characterize this type of product. Okay, FDA did not respond to that petition. In 2000, National Milk filed a trade complaint with FDA. And in this trade complaint, one of the things that we did was we predicted that if FDA wasn't going to enforce standards of identity through such things as allowing manufacturers to use the term soy milk, if they weren't going to enforce standards of identity for dairy products, we predicted, and accurately so, we predicted that there was going to be a tremendous expansion of imitation dairy products. Okay, at the point in time, this really hadn't yet gotten into mainstream grocery stores. Okay, but we predicted not only would we see a proliferation of products, but that they would become much more common, and in fact, that did happen. So FDA didn't directly respond to the trade complaint. However, they said that they planned to address it, quote, in the near future, which for those of us who work with agencies in D.C. In the near future, well, we're now 14 years out. Who knows how long that's going to be when we're going to get an official answer. So because we didn't get an official answer in 2001, so just a year later, National Milk submitted comments to FDA responding to that 1997 petition, again, urging FDA to really engage and to start enforcing and upholding standards of identity. FDA never acted on that petition, and they never responded to comments on that petition. So fast forward to a little bit, in 2010, we sent another letter to FDA, okay, predicting all the things that we said 10 years ago had come true. So this enormous proliferation of the types of products, okay, both in terms of the substrates that we're seeing being used in the fluid beverages, as well as proliferation to other foods, so beyond milk, okay, so into the yogurts, the cheeses, the ice creams, things like that. We, as part of that, so we're asking FDA to severely beef up their level of enforcement when it comes to standards of identity. And we cited that really the marketplace was such that it was causing consumer confusion. And I'm going to explain what I mean when I say consumer confusion. Dairy products enjoy a very positive connotation with consumers. Okay, so consumers think of dairy products as being nutritious and as being wholesome and as being healthy and as being safe. You know, all these good attributes that consumers think of when they think of dairy products, we call that the dairy halo. And really what's happening is you have these products that are definitely inferior, okay, in terms of inferior quality, in terms of inferior nutritional attributes. They're trying to buy into and sort of trade on this wonderful dairy halo that our products enjoy. And that's where we see the consumer confusion coming in. Okay, so I've told you a little bit about things that we've done trying to engage FDA. You may be asking, well, what does FDA really have to say? Because like I said, they haven't really responded to the letters that we've sent. We did get a response from the 2010 letter. Basically, it was a thank you very much, but we have other priorities right now, was the response that we got from the 2010 letter. But if we look at things FDA has done over the years, we can get some insight into what their official stance is. So if we look, in the 1980s, there were a couple of letters that FDA sent to importers. Okay, so these were folks who were trying to bring in products that were, in this case, specifically soybean-based. bring in these milk-type products to the United States, and FDA said, no, you can't put this term on the label. So they were trying to bring in something that was labeled soy milk or soybean milk, and FDA said that they don't recognize this as the name of the food. Okay. So you'll note the date here, so this is the 1980s, so this was prior to the Soy Foods Association sending their petition to FDA. Okay. What they were trying to do was to affect FDA policy and get FDA to recognize soy milk was a common or usual name. But as you can see here, they've said that they don't accept that as a valid name of a food. Not a whole heck of a lot happened in the intervening years. If we look through FDA warning letters, you can find in 2008, FDA sent a warning letter to a company where they said that they don't consider soy milk to be the common or usual name. It doesn't contain milk. Okay, very common sense here. They said that they do consider the common name for the type of product that was being sold to be soy drink or soy beverage. And if you do go to the dairy aisle, you will see some products that are labeled soy drink or soy beverage, which we would argue is appropriately named, not soy milk. So while FDA does have a position on these imitation dairy products using dairy terminology, the enforcement activity has been so low. Okay, really, I mean, just a handful of warning letters have been put out over the past couple of decades. The enforcement has been extremely limited, extremely infrequent, and I would say as a result has been highly ineffective. Okay. So that's sort of where we're coming from if we try to look at FDA's perspective on things. Now, I don't know how many of you follow this on a regular basis, but there was a warning letter that FDA put out to muscle milk in, let's see, this was probably summer 3 years ago, yeah, 2011. So muscle milk, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, used to be found in sort of your GNC type stores. Now, again, it's something you can find in your regular mainstream grocery store. It's marketed as a sort of a healthy milk type drink, but the name of the product is muscle milk. Okay, so you have this line of products that have milk right in their name. However, if you look at the ingredient statement for these products, there's no milk in them. Okay, there's definitely sodium caseinate. Okay, so you have caseinates in this beverage. You have milk protein isolate. You have whey protein isolate. But caseinates, milk protein isolates, whey protein isolates, those aren't the same thing as milk. Those aren't ingredients that I can use in making milk. They're not optional ingredients. These muscle milk products also contain vegetable oils. Okay, well, I can't use vegetable oil in something that is called milk. Okay, so here I have a product that is using a lot of ingredients that I can't put in milk. So FDA wrote them a warning letter in June 2011, and unfortunately, we can say that the warning letter was a great victory for us. However, it sort of rings hollow when, if you look at what I'm showing you on the screen here, the package on the left is the muscle milk package before the warning letter, and then the package on the right is a picture of the package after the muscle milk warning letter, after the company read the letter and made some labeling changes. And really, the key change that they made is the font size, in that the text that says contains no milk. Okay, so after receiving the warning letter, they increased the font size and said, okay, here, we're still going to keep using the term milk in our name, but we'll increase the font size of this little phrase that says contains no milk. Again, here I think you have something that is confusing to consumers. Okay, so you have a product called muscle milk that contains no milk. What does that mean? I don't think the average consumer understands what's in that product. What about a consumer who has a milk allergy? Okay, so if I see a product that says contains no milk, the name of the product has milk, but it says contains no milk. But then if I look, it has milk protein isolate and caseinate and whey. So you can see where the confusion comes about in products like this. Okay, I mentioned other regulatory agencies. We can look at USDA and, try to glean from some of the things that USDA has done, what their perspective is on these misbranded imitation dairy products. So if you look at the report that came out for the 2010 dietary guidelines, okay, in the report, we've gone, if you're familiar with the My Plate, we've gone from having a milk group to having a dairy group. Okay, the dairy group now includes things like soy beverage. However, the Dietary Guidelines report does acknowledge that the dairy group contains soy beverage, not soy milk. Okay, and they specifically say that because the term soy milk doesn't have official FDA standing, they're going to refer to it as soy beverage. However, they acknowledge that consumers are probably not going to see soy beverage in the grocery store. They're going to find products that say soy milk. Okay, so when they're making recommendations to consumers for milk alternatives, a calcium-fortified soy beverage is how it's referred to in the report. Unfortunately, while they acknowledge the labeling term correctly in the report, because it is so prolific in terms of what consumers are seeing in the dairy aisle, when you look at the My Plate website and you look at the consumer messaging on the website, specifically to consumers, you're still going to see references to soy milk as opposed to the calcium-fortified soy beverage. Okay. But clearly, in the Dietary Guidelines report, USDA did acknowledge that soy milk is the inappropriate term. Okay, and that was something that National Milk definitely had pushed for throughout the process of development of those guidelines. So, gosh, what a difference a name makes, right? So that's sort of what we're talking about here. I want to spend a little bit of time right now just talking to you about soy milk, because this sort of seems to be the product that sort of broke wide open this category of imitation dairy products. All right, so if you're thinking about brands of soy beverage, or I'm putting it in air quotes, soy milk, you might think of Silk, okay? Silk back in the mid-90s was, let's see, selling probably about $6 million worth of product, okay? And in 5 years, they went from $6 million to $140 million in sales. Okay, that's a huge increase from $6 million to $140 million. Gosh, how did they do that? Well, at one point, the CEO of White Wave, which manufactures Silk, was giving an interview, and they asked him what he attributed the success to. And here's what he had to say. He said, well, we also had to figure out how to get this product category to market. Dairy milk is a staple food that we consider a fundamental part of the scenery in a supermarket. And if you think about it, if you're trying to figure out, well, what are your main staples in the grocery store? Definitely, dairy milk is one of them. You think about what are the staples that most Americans have at home in the refrigerator. Milk, okay? Milk, that jug of milk is definitely one of them. So, as he said, why not position fresh soy milk to be as close as possible? Okay, now, unless you are very, very familiar with soy beverage or soy milk, let's talk for a minute about what soy milk looked like back in the 1980s. Okay, if you were to buy a package of soy milk in the 1980s you'd have to go to a health food store, but if you were to buy it and taste it, it was sort of bland tasting. Okay, probably had a beanie flavor, and it was a brown liquid. Okay, so definitely not what we think of today. If you were to go to the store and buy a package of soy milk. Okay, so what White Wave did, what the whole product category of soy milk did, was they were leveraging the familiarity that consumers have with milk. So they colored it. Okay, so it's no longer brown, they colored it white. They put it into the cardboard gable top packages that you would associate with a traditional milk carton. Okay, before that it was the aseptic package, and it was on the non-refrigerated shelf. So they put it into gable top packaging and they put it in the refrigerator case, right beside regular milk. Okay, they advertised and marketed the product as a replacement for milk. So a lot of the images in the ads and on the package, you know, show it being poured over cereal, or talk about how you can use it in baking. So really using it in place of milk. A lot of these products, you know, they went and added different nutrients so that they could compare themselves nutritionally to milk. You know, so things, you know, like being able to make the claim on the package, you know, as much calcium as a glass of milk. So those types of things. So it's definitely a different type of product when we talk about soy milk in the grocery store today compared to what was in the store, you know, 20, 30 years ago. Right? So again, you can see when I'm talking about trading on the dairy halo, that's definitely what they've done with this category. Now, I did mention I'm a food scientist. So as a food scientist, I can tell you I definitely appreciate all the technology in terms of processing and in terms of ingredient selection that goes into making these types of products. There's actually a lot of science that is in there if you think about it. So, you know, it's not just taking soybeans and soaking them in water and cooking them and grinding them up and running it through a filter. There's a lot of science that has to go into making that product. It's typically, you know, a rather watery product, so you're going to have to add ingredients to modify the texture, to improve the mouthfeel and make it thicker. Oftentimes you're going to have to do something to suspend the particles. A lot of the protein likes to settle out to the bottom of the container or the package. So you need to do something to prevent that precipitation and sedimentation. You need to do something to prevent the fat from coming to the top and creaming. You're going to have to do something to add sweetness to make it more palatable. So, you know, that's through adding sugars. You're also going to have to add flavors or add something to hide off flavors. Like I said, that traditional soy milk has a rather beany type taste. So you need to do something to sort of hide that off flavor. And then we talked about coloring it, you know, how you need to sort of bleach it to take away that brown color. And then you need to add nutrients to fortify it. You know, if you want to position it as a replacement for milk. One of the things with the products as they're made naturally and non-fortified, they don't have great nutritional profiles. So you need to add a whole slew of nutrients to more approximate the nutrient profile of milk. Specifically, if we're going to talk about, you know, calcium, because that's what people think of as a nutrient of importance when they think of milk, adding calcium to soy milk. The calcium likes to settle out, okay? You have a real problem with keeping calcium in suspension. Now, with milk, we don't have that problem because the calcium is associated with the casein micelle and it stays in suspension, and that's the casein is a great delivery vehicle for calcium. We don't have that with the soy-type beverages. In fact, I don't know how often or if you've ever gone to the store and purchased a container of soy beverage or soy milk. When you get to the bottom of the container, you'll see a thick layer of sludge at the bottom of the container. You know, that sludge, that sediment, that's where most of your calcium ends up, okay? So they're fortifying it with calcium, but the calcium can't stay in suspension, and it has a tendency to settle out. So researchers have actually measured and looked at the amount of calcium that goes into these products, and then looked to see what's in the sediment that settles out. You know, sometimes it's as much as 80% of the calcium ends up in that sludge at the bottom of the container. And that sludge is really, really hard to get back into suspension. You know, you need something that's almost the equivalent of a hardware store paint can shaker to try to get that sediment back up into suspension. So one of the reasons I bring this up is, you know, as I said, from a food science perspective, okay, there's a lot of great science and technology going on here. But when I talk to consumers and they think of these vegetable-based milk imitators, they think of them as being natural, you know, and being, you know, just, oh, it's so close to nature. Not really when you think about it, and you think about all the stuff that has to go in it to make it seem so close to what is a very natural food, okay? So, like I said, as a food scientist, I can definitely appreciate the science and technology there, but I got to tell you honestly, as someone who works in the dairy industry, in this case, I've got to say that imitation is not a very sincere form of flattery as far as I'm concerned. So, To go back, I mentioned we have this very cluttered marketplace, okay? Just this proliferation of products has really gotten out of hand. I want to be very clear, though, with what I am saying. So I showed you a National Milk's policy statement on imitation dairy products and labeling. I want to be very clear, though, that throughout everything that we've done, throughout everything that National Milk has done, everything we've advocated for, we have never said, and we are not saying that these products shouldn't be sold. We are not saying that the products shouldn't be available. We understand that consumers need choices. We understand that consumers want choices, and we understand that consumers will make choices about the beverages they drink for a whole variety of different reasons. You know, some of them are nutritional. It could be, you know, there's a social implication. It could be health-related. So consumers do need choices, and we recognize that. However, we maintain that if you're going to offer all these different products in the marketplace, they have to be properly labeled. Okay, and again, this gets back to that concept of consumer confusion. And all right, I just want to be very clear and upfront with everybody here, because I do talk about this issue to a variety of different folks and groups. And you know, a lot of times people will say to me, "This, like, Beth, you know, come on, consumers are not confused. Consumers know, you know, the average consumer is pretty smart. They know that a soybean does not have an udder." Okay, and when I talk about consumer confusion, I'm not saying that soybeans have udders. I know that soybeans don't have udders, and I know that consumers know soybeans don't have udders. That's not what they're confused about. What they are confused about is the nutritional benefit behind these types of products. You know, so, you know, I actually, as I talk to consumers and folks who purchase these types of products, one of the things that I hear most often is I hear folks say, well, FDA allows them to put soy milk on the front of the package. They can call it soy milk because it has the same nutrient profile and nutrients as milk. That's why they're allowed to do that. Okay, and that's exactly what the manufacturers of these types of products are hoping for. They're, again, playing on that dairy halo. Okay, but so that's where the confusion comes in, and I want to make that very clear, you know, because that's one thing that I hear all the time is, you know, people understand that these products don't come from animals, you know, and yes, I recognize that, but the confusion really comes down to what's in that package. Okay, there's a lot of talk about nutrition labeling. You know, if you follow anything having to do with regulatory activities, FDA is looking at revising and updating the nutrition facts panel. The reality is most consumers aren't looking at the ingredient statement. Most consumers aren't looking at the nutrition facts panel. Okay, as more and more consumers get farther and farther away from how food is manufactured, from how it's produced, they're less aware of the science and technology that goes into agriculture and that goes into food processing. Okay, so when they see these types of products in the grocery store, you know, they don't know what milk protein isolate is. They don't know what soy protein isolate is. Okay, what they do know is when they see on the front of the package, they see the word milk, they think that that's a nutritious, wholesome product, and they automatically think, okay, that has, you know, it's a good source of protein, it's a good source of calcium and other essential vitamins and minerals that I need. Okay, so that's really what I'm talking about when I talk about consumer confusion. Like I said, the amount of information that is conveyed with the name of the food cannot be underestimated. Okay, so as I mentioned, we have a very cluttered marketplace. FDA has been rather unresponsive to our pleas for them to focus on standards of identity. The marketplace has turned into, you know, utter chaos. I would say it's almost like the Wild Wild West, where you can do anything you want out there. So that leaves us, you know, so folks like me and National Milk wondering, well, what can we do? Okay, our recourse of going to FDA and saying, you know, enforce regulations, don't make new regulations, but enforce existing regulations, that strategy is not working. So we need to come up with a different plan. Right? And I want to show you, I'm going to talk about some of National Milk's efforts in a more subtle way to address this issue. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with the real seal. Okay, so this is, if you go to the grocery store on a variety of products, a lot of dairy products, you'll see this red sort of drop. Okay, this is the real seal that you'll find on various products. 2 years ago, National Milk assumed management of the Real Seal program. So if you're not familiar with the Real Seal is almost 40 years old. Sort of came about in a period of time back in the late 70s when you had a proliferation of imitation cheese on pizza. Okay, is one good example. You had all these non-dairy products that were showing up and really confusing consumers. Okay, so the idea was, when the seal was introduced, that if you wanted to make sure that your pizza, your frozen pizza that you picked up from the grocery store, was made with actual cheese, not imitation cheese, if you wanted actual cheese, you could look on the front of the pizza box for this red seal, and that would indicate to the consumer that this was, in fact, a pizza made with real dairy cheese, not the imitation stuff. Okay. However, after that initial push, okay, so there was some marketing and awareness and education campaigns that went on when the seal was first launched. Really, there was a span of about 20, 25 years where there wasn't a whole lot done in terms of marketing the seal. Okay, but again, as I've just described, when we look at that current marketplace, we're back to a lot of imitation products flooding the market. We're back to consumer confusion where they're not really sure what's in those packages. So 2 years ago, National Milk assumed management of the Real Seal program. It fits really well because National Milk's overall mission is to protect the integrity and the high value of U.S. dairy products. So we assumed management of the Real Seal, and we've started a campaign around the Real Seal. So we're sort of reinvigorating the Real Seal. The idea is that we want to increase consumer awareness about the benefits of true dairy products. Okay, so focusing on the health benefits and trying to clear up some of that consumer confusion. And there's a whole bunch of different attributes to that campaign. One is we do have a Facebook page. So I would encourage any of you guys who are on Facebook, if you haven't gone on to Facebook, look us up. It's Real Seal Dairy. I encourage you to be a fan. Okay, if you have any sort of desire to promote and be in the dairy industry. Really, this is our one aspect of our awareness campaign. And if you go on our Facebook page, you'll find a whole bunch of different postings. So there's a lot of recipes featuring real dairy products. In some cases, you'll find bits of trivia, talking about how milk gets from the farm to the refrigerator in your house. Sometimes it's just fun dairy humor, little quips and things like that. Sometimes it's links to a blog post, where someone went to a dairy farm and is talking about the experience and how they learned about how milk is produced and how cows are taken care of on dairy farms, things like that. So like I said, I'm talking about this Real Seal campaign because we're also, so here's another Facebook post, calling out these imitation dairy products. So like I said, the question of, well, what can we do? FDA is not going to do something. What can we do? So we're trying to build awareness around the benefits of dairy. We're also trying to build awareness around the fact that, those imitators aren't as great as you think they are. So, here's one post. And this is actual survey data. 1 out of 3 people think that soy and almond beverages are naturally nutrient-rich. So again, when you talk about consumer confusion, a lot of people think that these products are just naturally this packed with calcium and other vitamins and minerals. So this is one thing that we're doing to work on that. Then the next thing, so the seal has been animated. He's also been named. We had a naming contest last year. So the animated little seal is supposed to appeal to little kids. I don't think we have any of those on the call today. But tell you what I want to do is I want to play a little video for you.
Don't let your taste buds fool you. In April or any other time, it's not real dairy if it's made with a bean, a seed, a nut, or a weed. What's worse, imitation dairy products often don't have the same nutrition as real milk, cheese, and yogurt. The only answer to got milk is getting products with the Real Seal.
basically we've started a video highlighting the Real Seal, and this was the April video for the Real Seal for Darius. Okay, so that's the seal's name is Darius. Really sort of calling out those imitators, okay, you know, and with a pun on April Fool's Day. So it's sort of National Milk's way to sort of go on the offensive on some of these issues. I'm not sure that we're ever going to get FDA to actually stand up and take action, but this is just one of our efforts. So with that, I'm going to conclude, and I'm going to turn it back over to Eric and see if there are any questions that I can answer. I'm really hoping for good discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. That was I didn't know that a talk about policy in Washington would be as interesting as it was, actually. Yeah, thank you for talking about that. Since I have kind of, I don't know if it's a question or kind of a rant, but what is it? I mean, how do you recommend we deal? I mean, I know you guys are trying to deal with it on the social media side of things and on the bureaucracy side of things, but we, as dairy scientist people, encounter, you know, in our regular life all the time, people who have these same confusions. Because, I mean, first of all those products you showed, at least at my grocery store, are in the health market section, not the regular food section. So they're, I mean, even implied even further that they're healthier. Or if you go down the cereal aisle, now I've seen that they have yogurt cereal, and I'm pretty sure there's no live cultures of yogurt sitting in a box on a shelf like that. So what do you, I mean, how do you recommend that we just as regular graduate students or scientists educate the public to try and help with this misunderstanding of what things actually are? Because, I mean, people think these things are healthy, but yogurt chips in a cereal box are nothing more than sugar, really, right? I mean, there's
well,
much.
Okay. So, you know, in terms of what can you do, I would say, you know, don't underestimate the power that you have as an individual. So that would be my first comment. You know, a lot of this misinformation, you know, when you talk to people, you know, a lot of the misinformation comes from online sources. You know, it comes from someone reading a blog post, you know, or someone reading a magazine article or an online magazine article, you know, or an online health article, you know, health and fitness article. I mean, almost every single, I mean, I can literally tell you, not almost, I can tell you literally every single day, someone sends me a new something, whether it's a blog post, a website, an article online that deals with imitation dairy products and talking about how they're so much healthier for you than regular dairy products. Don't underestimate the power that you have, you know. So I know that there are a lot of folks, you know, dairy scientists, dairy graduate students who blog. I know that there are a lot of you who are engaged in social media. When you see those types of things and you see those comments online, you know, stand up and call them out. You know, I mean, it's okay to engage. Now, I'm not going to say that you want to engage every single time someone makes a crazy comment, you know, but when you can, you know, a good way to phrase something is, you know, as a dairy food scientist or as a dairy foods graduate student, you know, I know that the calcium in soy beverages isn't going to be as well absorbed from your body as the calcium from milk. You know what I mean? That's a simple statement that you're lending credibility to, and you're out there dispelling those myths. So I agree. This is really, really hard to combat because it's so prolific and it's gone on for so long, and it's only going to get worse. But I think every little bit that you can do as an individual, even if it's just through your online footprint, can be helpful. So my email address is up on the screen, so beth@nmpf.org. You know, if you have questions later, you know, and you'd like to reach out and talk to me about any of this stuff, please feel free to send me an email.
It was a very enlightening discussion or presentation on a topic that I know I get into arguments with. I don't know if I should call them arguments, but discussions with my non-dairy friends about how those yogurt chips aren't really good for you and all that stuff.
You know, I agree. Like I said, I get these questions all the time, and I think anything you can do to dispel that, you know, even if it's just, you know, one friend at a time saying, you know what, hey, got to tell you, algae milk, not the way to go, you know, if that's what it takes.
And I'm going to have to go look for algae milk on the grocery store shelf. I guess we'll wrap it up there, and thank you again, Beth, for taking time to share all this with us.
Sure, anytime. Thank you so much for having me.
Right.